Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I am here today with Nick. Nick Panzarella is an Italian American language activist for the Sicilian language based in Houston, Texas. He is the president of the American branch of Cademia Siciliana and is currently raising a child in Sicilian, and with his wife is publishing a bilingual Sicilian-English children's book with UL Press in 2027. Thank you so much for being here today, Nick. How are you?
It's great to be here, and thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm great today.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You know, I'm always excited to talk about Sicilian. So
I know you are. I'm shocked that you have another Sicilian on. You've done so many episodes about it. So thank you.
we have, and it's always a joy for me. And understanding that everyone's perspective is different. These conversations always lead to beautiful things. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you today. I like to start each episode with the same question, which is, what is your first language and which languages have you learned to speak?
So my first language is English, Southern American English, and I've learned to speak Italian, Sicilian, Spanish, a little bit of Portuguese, French, and some German and some Basque.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, but just I'd say I'm very confident in maybe the first four. English, Sicilian, Italian, Spanish.
Okay.
In my, yeah.
All right. Talk to me a little bit about how those languages came into your life.
Yeah. At home we grew up speaking English, but my dad would use a couple of Sicilian words with us. And so a way that we didn't really differentiate, it was just, some of the words we used at home were Sicilian. We might have even called them Italian when I was growing up. I can't really remember. And so we had about a dozen words that we'd use like that. My mom also is Louisiana. Her mother spoke Louisiana French, and so she would also use a little bit of French at home too.
Mhm.
And so kind of always seeing that there was people who spoke other languages around me, but I just grew up being able to communicate in English. And so as soon as I could, I wish I could have taken Italian earlier, but they didn't have that at the schools that I went to. And so I took Spanish as soon as I could, got pretty good with that. And then I'd visited Wicked and this is kind of getting into the Sicilian here, but
Yeah.
I started learning some Italian with the textbook my dad had in the house when I was maybe 13, 14 or so. But then when we visited our cousins in Sicily, I noticed that amongst each other, they only spoke in Sicilian. They all spoke Italian, no problem, but amongst each other, they preferred Sicilian. And there were some of the older folks in the family that really did not communicate in Italian.
Okay.
And so I realized, well, this is the language I must speak. And so I got a Sicilian grammar book and would start to create verb charts. I'd take my Spanish homework and I would build a verb chart from the Sicilian. And so sort of doing that simultaneously. Studied Italian. We have an Italian Cultural Center in Houston. We're lucky to have. Took some classes there. And then was able to study abroad in Italy, in central Italy, in Bologna. Learned that after graduating. Went down to Sicily, spent 6 months there in Palermo to try to learn Sicilian. Palermo's not a great place to learn Sicilian if you're not a native speaker.
Can
And so,
confirm.
yeah. Whether that's between the difficulty of the variety, but also really a lot of folks in the city, there is a big stigma divide. So people who are like middle class, if they're students, they really either can't speak it well or don't want to speak it in public. Whereas if you go to any small town, anyone of any generation, any class has no problem speaking it and isn't going to be weird about it. But so I should have just moved to my family's village.
I've told this story before on the podcast, but I've visited Palermo and I love it. And I'm so glad that you had 6 whole months there. I didn't even have 6 days in Palermo, and I regret it every day. But before I had gone to Sicily, and I've been all over Italy, but before I'd gone to Sicily, I had people who are Sicilian American, and I would tell them, "Oh, I'm on my way to Sicily, and I'm so excited." And I said, "Well, you're not going to understand anybody when you get there." And I speak Italian, so I'm like, what? I was like having a meltdown. And when I got to, long story short, I got to Palermo, I was fine. Like I didn't have any issue with that. But by that point, I was so desperate to hear Sicilian. And I
Mm,
was trying to eavesdrop on people, and I'm like, well, no, I understand that. So that's, that's not it. And I was listening. I was like listening to as much as I could, and I didn't hear a word of Sicilian
mm,
at all. I was so disappointed.
interesting.
So when you're saying, not a good place to learn the language, and I'm saying I confirm, I
Yeah.
understand why, but you're unlocking something that I didn't think about a stigma of people who maybe don't want to speak Sicilian in the city or don't feel comfortable or feel ashamed to do so. Shame is a big word that I don't mean to put on anybody, but what was your sense of the dynamic when it came to that?
Yeah, no, shame's a good word. Vergogna is, yeah, it's definitely something to feel about it. And it's something that some people in the diaspora put back on, some Sicilians today. I've seen some folks say, vergognati, you should be ashamed for not speaking Italian or
Mm,
for not speaking Sicilian.
mhm,
And so, uh, yeah, there's a big stigma. So I've seen people too from the city, they'll come out to other small towns, and I've even asked them like, oh, how do you say this in Sicilian? And they're like, I don't know. Like, I don't know anything in Sicilian. It's like, okay, buddy. Um, the stigma is real and it is having an impact on who's able to speak the language today.
mhm,
However, we're still lucky that all these people who claim not to speak it still can understand it. They have, I'd say, they're passive bilinguals. And then they also have the accent down really well too. And so that's one of the things that's kind of maintained within the Italian that they speak.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, it's definitely a class thing. And I'd say the closer, if someone has come from that class and moved up, those are the people who are going to be the most adamant about never wanting to speak Sicilian. And I've had conversations with a lot of folks who I'm speaking only in Sicilian. I kind of commit when I'm there. That's all I speak. And those people will still respond to me in Italian. We're having a conversation where I'm speaking one language and they're speaking the other, and they don't want to change. If you go to, let's say, like more working class parts of Palermo, you can hear it a lot. And so, yeah, it's funny because when I'm outside of Sicily, I'm really concerned about the fate of the language. But if you get over there and you're looking in the right places, and the better your Sicilian is, this is the trick too. People don't want to speak with an outsider in the language because they don't want to be perceived. And also, they just assume an outsider doesn't understand it. The better you are, the more they'll speak to you. And so it's like,
mm,
well, then how do you get good if no one will speak to you until you're totally fluent? And that's kind of one of the tough things. That's why it's good that we have folks like Ilaria who are teaching Sicilian online, teaching classes. Um, but I noticed in some of the more working class parts of Palermo, it was interesting. If you're on a bus, he'd be like, man, I've learned, I've been here for a long time. I've studied Italian really well, and I can't understand anyone around me. And then
mm.
I realized, wait, everyone on this bus is all speaking Sicilian. Uh, and
Interesting.
so, but, so I have a similar experience on a bus in a working class neighborhood in Rome, and it's like, it's all Italian. So, or, Romanesco, which is still a dialect of Italian. Um, so it's out there, but
Mhm,
it's at risk for sure.
mhm. So what you're saying is we need to get on the bus.
We get on, yeah, yeah. If you're on the bus, you're gonna have a higher chance of. If you're in the taxi, maybe not.
Right.
Uh,
Okay. We're not walking around. We're not pedestrians in
yeah,
Sicily. We are riding the bus.
yeah. Yeah, gotta get on the bus for sure.
So when you're at a point where you deciding that you want to take learning Sicilian seriously and you want to commit to learning the language, what were some things that you were experiencing at that time and how did it feel to go through that process of coming back to this language, reclaiming the Sicilian language and connecting with your Sicilian roots?
Yeah, it's complicated. I think the deeper you get into it too, it's alienating in some ways because I think those of us in the diaspora who want to learn this language, we want to learn it because of our family, because of our parents or grandparents. Some people are really, really lucky to have totally fluent parents and grandparents here in the United States. I would say generally within the Sicilian American community, it's very rare to have more than just a few words or phrases in your family still. So like my father, who taught me, all the Sicilian I knew when I was little, is not a fluent speaker. And so now that I've gotten to a very high level of Sicilian, it's almost alienating for him because he's like, what are you talking? What are you saying? Hearing me speak to my son and exclusively in Sicilian. Um, on the other hand, too, with cousins in Sicily, folks who are there is not just a stigma, but it's almost like some people are confused, like why we're so concerned about this language. And I don't know if it's hard for us to understand in the United States because we don't have dialects as much, like as drastic. I mean, they're not dialects, right? These are totally different languages
Mhm,
that people are treating like it's just a different like class or a different like register of our spoken language.
mhm,
And so I guess I like to think of it as if someone came to Texas and was like, I'm in Texas now, like I must have the heavy Texas accent and the Texan grammar, like I done did, and all this. And your average Texan professional would be like, buddy, just like relax. You don't have to be so obsessed. And I think that's kind of what a lot of my cousins and friends in Sicily are a little bit like. Um, but that said, those are kind of like the extremes. uh, it is really, really fulfilling to use the language to be able to speak it because there are so many contexts when it's still used, whether that's art, music, poetry, theater, movies. Still, a lot of the most famous American movies with Italian Americans use the language in it. So there's scenes in The Godfather, and other movies with gangsters and things like
mm.
that that use Sicilian.
Which is a different conversation
That's a different
we could have
conversation.
for sure, yeah.
And in Sicily, not so much, but also in mainland Italy,
Mhm,
there's a big issue with and not just being associated with low class, but with criminality. And
mhm,
so you'll often see folks often who move to the north or maybe who live in Palermo who say like, we have to stop associating this language with the mafia. Whereas that's not something that would ever happen in my family's town or most towns. It's like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, the mafia uses it, but also the priest and the mayor use it.
mhm,
Um, but when you get out in that context, there is a concern that, oh, if I speak Sicilian, I'm considered a criminal in mainland Italy,
mhm.
um, which I think is diminishing as time goes on, I hope.
Course. Something I'm picking up on that you said, when I get my pencil, that's when the real questions come out.
Uh,
Something I'm picking up that you're saying is that there's an interest in Italian American, Sicilian American community here with the language, and then you're encountering people in Sicily who are kind of like, what's the big deal? Um, so I'm wondering if there's a sense of you feeling like you are between two communities or you're serving two communities separately with the language activism that you're doing, and what kind of considerations, if that's the case, what kind of considerations are you encountering when you're serving two different communities with two different ideologies?
it's a really great question. Yeah, it is like we have these people who are in the United States who want to reclaim their heritage, bring the language back in the home. And then we have a community in Sicily who it's almost more of like about rights. So this is the indigenous language of Sicily. This is a language that the majority of the population speaks, but it's not recognized by any body. It's not recognized by the region or the state itself. And so people have no right to use it. They have no translators for it. There's no formal bodies. There's not a single printing press and not a single magazine. Not a, I guess there's two podcasts now that use it. And so, we're working from a base where this is just, it's not even considered as a language at all. And so that's much more of a fight that's kind of aligned with other, we could say like sort of like the nationalist movements of like the Catalonians, the Basques, the Welsh, and the Irish too, where they're trying to take this language that's not seen as something that's legitimate and bringing it into the state, bringing it into the universities, and saving it before it's too late. Because if we wait too long in Sicily, then we're working from like where I am, which is, you have as a speaker who's at like, 0.01, percent of the language and learning from scratch. And when you do that, as you bring in a new grammar, you bring in new pronunciations, you're kind of reviving a dead language. And then that's just almost like a hobby. It's
Mhm,
impossible to do almost unless you have the full backing of a state,
mhm,
to do it. And so in Sicily, it's about removing the stigma, changing course, making it a legitimate language, and putting it into institutions. In the United States, it's about providing resources for learning the language from scratch.
mhm.
People in Sicily don't need verb charts. People in the
Right.
United States need verb charts, and we don't really have them. And so, I mean, we have a few, and there's a really great book that an American created,
Mhm,
Introduction to Sicilian Grammar, and then also Gaetano Cipolla, who's in Queens.
mhm.
He's a saint in our culture. Has created the first legitimate textbook for teaching. He's got two textbooks for teaching Sicilian, basically as a foreign language, and we need a
Mhm.
lot more resources like that.
Absolutely. Oh, resources. I love resources, and I wish that I could fund so many people who need resources in these languages because it's so necessary. It's vital. It's important, and it adds to the idea of legitimacy because a lot of times when people don't see something written or they don't have the hard text in front of them, they're like, oh,
Hmm.
whatever. But
Yeah.
seeing a whole shelf of grammar books in a language does something, subconsciously in our brains, I think, and we need that for all the languages that you mentioned and Sicilian too. So um we'll maybe we'll talk more about that later
You
because
know, it's interesting. I do hear people say, I like to read the comments to see how opinion is shifting because it has shifted in the last 5 years
uh-huh.
in Sicily. But I'll see people say in Italian, like, Sicilian is not a dialect, it's a language. And one of the things they'll say a lot, it has its own grammar.
Mm.
And they don't say grammar necessarily as in the term of like its own like grammar, but they'll talk about like it's got its own grammar book, you know? It's like, and so that does definitely bring legitimacy.
Yeah, yeah. Here in the US, I would imagine that a lot of people who are coming back to Sicilian and wanting to bring it back in the home maybe have situations similar to yours where you heard a bit of it growing up or people who have Sicilian parents or anything in between. Talk to me a little bit about some of the stories that you've heard from people who are learning the language and people who are making the effort to learn here in the US.
Yeah. So I always like to look for folks, who's out there who has maintained the language in the United States or even Canada too, North America. It's impressive, and with Instagram, it's great. We keep finding new people. Um, I'm really impressed by the community in Independence, Louisiana.
Mm,
Um, and that's actually the setting for the book that my wife and I are writing. But Independence is a very small community in central Louisiana, and about 90% of the population is of Sicilian descent.
okay.
And so they were folks that came in through New Orleans, and they were strawberry and sugarcane farmers. And so there's folks there who are my age who all four of their grandparents are Sicilian.
Mm,
They still eat Sicilian, do the traditional food, do the traditions, speak a lot of the language at home. And to me, that's so alien, especially in the South, because there's a lot of Sicilian folks down here. It's surprising if Houston too has a huge community, but we're not concentrated in a way that a town, it's a small town where everyone's Sicilian. So there's a girl, Leslie Volo, who is really active out there. And it's crazy some of the words that she can remember that folks in Sicily don't know. I think that's
mm.
what Sicilians love to hear is like, oh, the Americans speak Old Sicilian. It's not always true, but it is true that there's some words like, no, that's a native Sicilian word that hasn't been replaced by Italian yet. Um, and so even like for example, St. Joseph's Day, it's, Jesus' father, and so we celebrate that as Father's Day in March.
Mhm.
And so when you create an altar to St. Joseph's, you do a lot of special cookies, cucinati, and I didn't realize there was a name for you create some that are in big shape. Some of them look like a cross, some are a fish, some are like the monstrance from a church. And I was calling them cucidati, which is just what you call them in general. But Leslie was like, no, 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 that's like lavada. Lavada is like it's what you call one of those shapes. And so she had a lot of these words. Um, there's another gentleman here named Santo Fontana who lives in Houston. He moved here in 1959. He's the only Sicilian native who's part of the Italian club that I'm a member of that just shut down. And what we have debates in Cademia Siciliana about which words are authentic now, which ones make sense. A good example, the word leaf is foglia in Italian. In Sicilian, it would have been pambina. But then also, pambina. And foglia is another accepted Sicilian word. If you hear foglia, it's foglia, that GL becomes a GGH. So it's okay. This one is more common now because of Italian. And so someone from Palermo will be like, look, I've never heard anyone say pambina. Foglia is a Sicilian word. Like, let's not try to bring back a dead word.
Mm.
My friend Santo over here, who's in his 80s, he's saying pambina for everything. And so it's interesting just hanging out with this guy. It's like, oh, we had a debate about if this is authentic or not. Santo's not thinking about it. He's using the word that's natural to him.
Mhm.
Um, but he's on the extreme end, right? There won't be too many Santos going forward. I've got another great friend, Dario, who's up in the north. He was born in Catania and moved here when he was young.
Mhm.
And his father, this is a really cool story. I love this because it's like I think about like how do I do this with my kid? His father would switch both Italian and Sicilian with him when he was growing up.
Mhm.
And then at a certain point, he stopped speaking Italian with them. And Dario asked his dad, he's like, why are you only speaking Sicilian now? And he says, because you learned Italian. I was worried that you wouldn't be able to speak it, but you did it. And so now we can speak our language, which is Sicilian.
Oh.
And this is something that doing the research about like how do you maintain a language in another country, there's a lot of good research about how folks, even like me, who are second language learners who are now
Mhm.
passing on the language, how to do that. But places like Italy, where there's two languages at home, or Germany too, Spain. I mean, this is something that is much more common around the world than we like to think.
Mhm.
And so, if you're from Guatemala too, right, you might have a Mayan language and Spanish. Those are both community languages your family needs to know. So, what are you supposed to do at home? And so kind of looking at, okay, that was one model. I'm doing the same thing in a way at home as I switch languages. One day I speak Italian, one day Sicilian with my son. Um, I'll just tell two quick stories too. Paul Roche is the founder of Cademia Siciliana. So Paul founded it with Salvatore Baiamonte, who lives in Palermo. So we had a Sicilian American and a Sicilian, both young guys, really concerned to take a linguistic approach to trying to save our language. And Paul is from a small community in Tampa where it's all folks from this one town near Agrigento. And Paul is my age, a little bit, maybe like 2 or 3 years older, and grew up speaking Sicilian at home with his grandparents. And, for me, it's incredible to see young folks who are doing that, who were raised like that. But there's let's say dozens of them. There are dozens of us. And so, and then the last gentleman, I'm really inspired by a lot of my stories from the South too. That's what I know. And there's a lot of Sicilians in the Northeast.
Mhm.
But down here, it's kind of like, oh, there's all these pockets. But Damon Palermo too. He was the president of our Italian club for a while, and he might have just turned 60, but he's in his like 50s. He was one of the young guys because this club was like 90-year-olds.
Mhm.
And so Damon also similarly, grew up in Houston and just talking with friends, family, and grandparents, is now fluent in Sicilian. I mean, he might have been raised fluent. I still never really understood how Damon is fluent because none of these guys who are like, younger than in their 70s speak the language.
Uh-huh.
Um, but Damon, yeah, knows the language really well, knows Italian, stays in touch with his cousins in Sicily, and then raised his kids. He would speak to them in Sicilian. They ended up being passive bilingual,
Mhm.
which is, if we want to talk about kids, that's like kind of it's a danger, it's a risk, but
Yeah.
it's better. It's great because a passive bilingual with just a little bit of effort, they can become a full bilingual.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm at meetings with Damon, and he's like, "Passami un cucchiaio, give me the knife," and his kids understand and they'll do it, but they don't speak it back to him. So,
Right. Right.
um, yeah,
Thank you for coming with stories because we
I'm all,
love.
they're living up here all these
No.
times.
No, I love it. I really love to hear stories and I love to share stories and for shouting out all the people that you did. I hope they'll hear the way that you told of them and gave them their praise, their props in this conversation. And
Of
I hope they'll know how important they have been in your journey. You pointed out raising kids and passive bilingualism, and I know that you're raising your son and you are speaking Sicilian with him. I'd love to hear how that's developing, how that developed.
Yeah,
Eh,
yeah. So having a child, yeah, really like changed a lot of things for me because, like I said, since I was relatively young, I've been interested in trying to learn Sicilian. And even though it sounds like I made quite a big commitment by moving to Palermo, it was still sort of like a passive thing. I was taking a break, after college, I tried to learn the language. Okay, I moved back. I was passively involved with Cademia Siciliana and, I kind of reached a level where I could do some text. I could make people laugh, but there was still like I was missing a lot of grammar. I kept saying that there's like a few verbs that are weird in Sicilian that I just don't know, and it was like you just need to learn the vocab. You've got a lot more learning to do, and I
Mhm.
kept trying to downplay it. When I always knew I wanted to raise a child bilingual, but when my wife, let me know that she's pregnant, I was like, it just something clicked, and I was like, okay, it's gonna be Sicilian, and we got to get a lot better before this happens. So I had about 9 months to go from let's say like a A2, B1, maybe, um, to try to get up to really comfortable. At least B2 is maybe C1.
Yeah.
And so, like you were saying, I ran into the same problem. I visited Palermo. You're here to hear the language. Where is the language? And then when you find it, it's often very mixed. And so, when you mix a language, that's not, how do I say this? It is not invalid. It is an authentic way to speak the language. If they mix the languages, that's fine. But me as a learner, when I hear that, it's hard for me to understand what is correct grammar because you start to think, oh, if you can mix it, there's no rules to Sicilian. We can do it any way we want.
Right.
Um, so I started getting really active with Cademia Siciliana. I saw other folks who were kind of waiting in the wings, and I started texting with them separately. We started creating separate group chats. I was really lucky that a 15-year-old named Salvatore Longitano started a subreddit called R Siciliano, and he wanted to create a space for people who spoke only in Sicilian and used the orthography of Cademia Siciliana. And so, why did that matter? So, Cademia Siciliana had this chat because there were so many Italian Americans in it. The language often switched to English, and so we'd be
Mhm.
talking about Sicilian in English or talking about it in Italian. Very common. I hear this in Louisiana too. A lot of people say, "Stop talking about French and English. If you want to bring back your language, you need to talk in the language."
Right.
Um, it takes a lot of work to get to that point where you can do that though. So Salvatore created this place, and we can talk about this orthography later. Orthography just means a writing system, and the Academia writing system is very helpful because it gives you a standard way to write the language down, and that matters because there's a lot of different ways you can pronounce it and say it, and that's another one of these things where it can give you the impression that there are no rules.
Mhm.
And so people can say, "Oh, well, just in my town we do this," and it's like, "Well, yeah, in your town you do say it a certain way, but let's talk about like what processes, you know." It'd be like if we said in Boston they say park, and so we can't spell park with an R in it. We have to spell it PAHK. And it's like, well, what? Like, what are you talking about? So, creating this space, I met Salvo. I met this another gentleman, Alessio Michetta, and we kind of created a little crew. And we approached Cademia and we said, look, we want to be a part of this. And we basically learned how to write an orthography that your linguist created. He did his master's and his PhD, and basically studying orthographies of Sicilian, seeing how would you be able to teach it, created this document. This 15-year-old learned it just from a handful of Facebook posts and has been able to kind of teach others. It created a document called Learn and Understand Sicilian, and we've been able to share that with a lot of folks. Um, and so by talking with them pretty much every day, just texting back and forth, I got to a really confident level of Sicilian. I started creating lists of words that were like, what would you say to a kid? How do you talk about, I want to change your diaper. I also got myself like almost like a baby master's in child bilingualism, reading all the literature that was out there. There's a really, really good book called Bilingual Children. I think it's very simple, by George Saunders. And he was a Australian professor who learned German and decided to raise his children with German in Australia.
Mm.
And so that's like no heritage at all, just wanted to do it, did it in the 80s, documented it. And so that's kind of like the Bible I used. And so from 27 weeks, when the child could hear in the womb, started speaking Sicilian home, reading out loud, would watch and listen to Sicilian music or TV with my wife. And then when the baby was born, I brought Leggere e Capire Siciliano, the document that we created with Salvatore, I brought it to the hospital and started reading short stories from it the day that my child was born. And so, yeah, I've been speaking with him ever since. He's 3 years old now, and he understands completely everything I say, both Italian and Sicilian. We switch, and he speaks a decent amount, and he can. And now he's at the point now where I'm going to start encouraging more and more speaking. And also, my wife she's studying Italian, and so we'll have days where we all speak Italian, which helps. And then Sicilian is just going to be increasing that content,
Yeah.
which is why we're pushing for so many people to make more content. My son has heard Ilaria's voice quite a bit from her podcast. Dario Cascio is another podcaster who's done an audiobook that we play a lot. And then that's why we're writing a bilingual kids book too, because we
Mhm.
want something with high level content that's in both languages that other folks can be able to use to bring the language into their home again.
I love it. I love it. Take me back to when, and I hope I got this right. I just jotted it down while you were talking, but take me back to when you were talking about academia and the orthography. We're working with a language where there's There are different dialects in
Yeah,
Sicilian, just so our listeners know. Like
yeah.
it's not an island of everyone speaking exactly the same way from east to west. Okay, I'm trying to break this question in two pieces
This is a
because
great question. This will be the juiciest part of the whole podcast.
with orthography, and tell me about Academia's role in creating a standard orthography. I would imagine, as I said, we have an island of people who, not that there are no rules, but maybe the words willy-nilly could apply
So I
here
know.
when it
Oh
comes
yeah.
to spelling. Um, so what kind of what do you know about what was encountered while we're developing this orthography? And maybe people who butted heads a bit about we use this letter or we don't use that letter or we,
Yeah.
you know,
The headbutting continues.
yeah.
Um, so okay, yeah, this is a great question. And so before we like to give everyone perspective too, we need to keep in mind that all languages have a lot of diversity. If we were to line up every single variety of English from one end of the world to the other, I mean, we've got Irish people, we've got Jamaicans, we've got Australians, and then even within Australia and the United States, like for example, Houston, we call the road on the side of a highway a feeder road. My wife is from North Texas, and they would never say that. They call it an access road, I guess. Other parts of the world don't have access roads, so they don't have a word for it. And so the natural state of languages is for incredible diversity. And so we've seen this everywhere in the world. Sicily did not go through the process of state formation. And so in the late 1800s, 1900s, we have unification. Napoleon comes up with the idea of a centralized state. And so what you do is you come up with a standardized book. An academic says, this is Italian now, and everyone in the country has to learn Italian this way. And that didn't happen in Sicily. And that's probably a good thing that didn't happen because we get to maintain our diversity. But what eventually happens is when it enters the school systems, everyone is taught how to write the language in a way that makes sense in certain registers. We write one way when we're writing to a judge. We write a different way when we're texting our friends. And that's something that we naturally understand. And it takes about 18 years of schooling for us to get that down. It's not a simple process, especially in English, because we have a very difficult way to write, but also in Italian. And you've studied Italian. People say Italian is written the way it's spoken. It's not totally true. There is the thing about CHs and CIs, which you have to learn. But there's also something called synthetic doubling. And so if you have a word like three, tre, if it's followed by a word, so tre cerchi, that ch becomes doubled. So tre cerchi. That's not written. And that's because the way that the words were in Latin, when they switched to Italian, it basically like it's missing something at the end of the word three. And so they want to add a double. So those are things that happen in Italian. When people want to write Sicilian, they want to write every single sound down.
Okay.
And that's not the way that writing systems were written, actually. They're somewhere in between representing sound and representing meaning. And that's a delicate balance that we don't realize that we're taught over the course of time. Okay, so that's to say, writing systems are difficult.
Mm-hmm.
Sicilian is blessed that it has been written for about 1,000 years. It's potentially the first Romance language to be written and used formally in a court from the time of the Norman invasion. And so we have a very long history. It changes a lot from the beginning to today. What our linguist Salvatore Baiamonte has done is looked at what exists currently, what are the norms that people are used to, what are some things that would be a little bit better at representing the true sounds of Sicilian, and what are ways to deal with variety, the changes in variety, and the sound changes that naturally happen. Because some of the sound changes are very strange. What I mentioned before was just doubling in Italian. Okay, in Sicilian, you not only have doubling, but you have totally changing of sounds. So 3 days. Ci giorna. So giorna is how you say it. Look at J, giorna. It becomes ci giorna. Ci giorna. So un giorno, due giorna, e ci giorna. So it actually changes from here to nya, here to ya, and here to gya.
Okay.
How do we write that down? One
Right.
word, 3 different ways. The way people write it, and traditionally, is just they make it different, each one. So the first one, they're connected with a nya sound. The second, they're split, and then they get connected again with a gya sound in that third one. It's very complicated and hard to read. And so one of the recommendations is look, we write Chigiorna, but anyone who's a native speaker is going to pronounce Chigiorna. It's just, yeah, that's you just couldn't say it any other way if you're a Sicilian. And so those are some of the things we're simplifying, but those are the changes. There's a lot of diversity. How do we represent that? I'll give you another example. To say we are is sem, sem.
Sam.
For me, it's siem, siem with like an I there.
Mhm.
And then there's a possibility, I'm not totally sure, but in Palermo it could be siam, siam.
Huh.
And so,
Okay.
and so you have kind of different changes. What we recommend is vowels, they go crazy in Sicilian. Vowels get nuts. And so we say, let's look at what was it historically? Okay, it was a simple E. We're going to represent the E. And we recommend everyone pronounce it and do not change the pronunciation. We recommend you maintain your pronunciation and say siamo and write semo. This is a recommendation. What this doesn't mean is you're not allowed to text your grandma siamo. And this is why things have gotten really heated about this is people do not write Sicilian. There's a very, very small percentage of the population. There's about 5 million Sicilians, and about the 5 million in Sicily, potentially 7 million speakers globally. And so they never write it. About couple hundred people write it on a regular basis. We're seeing more and more people write it, but when they write it, they're writing in very informal circumstances, texts, comments.
Right.
And
Okay.
so people at Cademia have made a big error, which was correcting people's comments on Facebook and stuff. It's annoying, right? No one wants to be corrected. And you're doing it on Facebook where it doesn't matter how you write. And so that turned a lot of people off. If people had formal circumstances to write, I think then they might say, and we've had people say, I don't write because I don't know how to write it. And if we say, no, well, here's the tools. You could follow this, you can adjust it where you want. We're not a governmental body, but this is a recommendation for you to use in the
Okay.
talk.
Okay.
And so we've seen a lot of people adopt it. Some people adopt parts of it. Some people don't adopt the whole thing. Another example is the D sound. There's something called rotization. So
Mhm.
it's changing of a D to an R. It's very common from Naples on down. And so a lot of people, to them, that's like the most Sicilian thing is like, I don't say due, I say rui. And I don't say, de mattina, I say re mattina. Riesci instead of dieci. For us, that thing we talked about earlier, that synthetic doubling, that you got to keep in mind. Sicilian is changing depending on how these words touch. So
Mhm.
you might say ed due, ed due. So you might say ed due with the word and causes a doubling. So you'd say ed due, but if it was alone, you'd say rue. So if in your dialect you both pronounce due et rui, it just depends on the circumstance. Our recommendation is let's just keep it as do it all the time, and anyone who has a rhotic pronunciation can just pronounce the R as it is natural to them.
Mhm.
Um, and so all that said, we do not propose a standard form of speaking the language. We're opposed to creating a standard formal version of Sicilian. We've seen other people want to do that. They look at maybe past versions of Sicilian and they say, let's, oh, what people speak now is dialect. We need to go back to the traditional Sicilian that the king spoke. It's like, no, we're not making up. This is not Esperanto. People already speak the language, and we just need to give them a tool to represent it. And the last thing I'll say before I pause here is that we are lucky in that there's an incredible amount of diversity from, let's say, all of Sicily and the area around Reggio, which is the tip of Calabria,
Mhm.
is Sicilian. As you go up Calabria, it still seems like Sicilian, but the grammar starts to change the further you go north.
Mhm.
Sicily is lucky in that it is an island, and so for as much diversity as we have, everyone can understand everyone. Even as extreme as it gets, the language is still the same. There's a few major grammatical changes, but no one has a problem understanding each other. When you get to mainland Italy, because you can continue to move, you get bleeding into different languages, and so things can change drastically, and you don't really know where to cut the line.
Right.
For us, we all understand each other. It's all Sicilian, and so we're really lucky in that. But people, because it's not a standard language and it's not used for anything formal, it's more fun to talk about the differences than to recognize how similar all the varieties actually are.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that Cademia is suggesting um this orthography and making suggestions because you're
Mm,
creating this reference. And for now, this is just my viewpoint on pretty much everything. Right now, people may have opposition or they may say, whatever, I don't really understand it. In 50 years from now,
mm,
this could be like a Bible, in terms of um orthography, in terms of writing. And I think that this is just my opinion, but I think that the way that the orthography is suggested over time is when we'll really see the effect of it, when we'll really see how it's impacted community and how it can impact future generations of Sicilian speakers and learners. So I think that's tremendous.
think you're right. And even like I said, who's the one who taught me how to write it? A 15-year-old. The young people, they recognize it as, look, there's no one else promoting a way to write it.
Mhm.
This is the only people who are recommending a way that's not, it's not hegemonic. It's not trying to crush out variety. It's a tool for us. Young people get it. The old people, and then actually, this is, if you want to talk about drama, there is a center for Sicilian studies at the University of Palermo. And so this awesome dictionary is produced by them. They do incredible research, but they are entirely opposed to the formal usage of Sicilian. They're opposed to any promotion of any formal writing system. They see that as like interfering with natural processes. To them, Sicilian is a wounded, endangered animal to be observed as it dies. And so when you step in or you do anything, you're doing something artificial. But these are Sicilians. These are speakers of the language who were taking the language into their hands and saying, no, I want it to be able to be taken seriously and to be in these other contexts. And the older folks don't like it, and so they're not proposing an alternative. If it were up to the professors at the CSFLS, if they had a proposal for an orthography, we would already be using it. But what they're doing is basically saying it is worth representing the way people speak, but it is not worth trying to propose a way for people to write. Um, and so it's something we butted heads with a lot, and I think it's just a generational change thing. The
Mm.
younger linguists, people who are going to school now, they want to collaborate with us. And so those people will be professors in 15 years. And we can look at the Basques, Romansh, these other languages that have way less speakers than us. There's only 700,000 Basque speakers. We've got, like I said, 5 to 7 million. Romansh has like 10,000 speakers in
Mhm.
Switzerland. And when they were able to create a unified script, they were able to get publishers, DK Press. They do like these picture dictionaries, which are awesome. I would recommend buying one in any language you're studying. And they were able to produce content in Romansh. There was a backlash, and people were like, no, I want to represent my specific variety. And things have started like they have some issues. And so it's always a balance, making people happy, making sure that they are truly represented and not squished. But if the Basques were able to do it when they have 5 different varieties that were totally like almost incomprehensible,
Mhm.
and we should make one note too, because I know some people are going to comment like Basques, they created a fake language. When the Basques created their unified version,
Mhm.
they had to find equilibrium, and they're getting there now, where they said, this is what we're going to use for formal text and to communicate across regions, but we also want to introduce the local variety into signage, education, and things like that. And it's a long process. We can't figure this stuff out overnight, but it's about people, standing up, advocating for the variety, making sure it is represented, but then also recognizing you have to have a way to write your language if you're going to live in the 21st century with digital tools and AI and things like that.
Absolutely. For my listeners, I want them to know that there is an excellent episode of this podcast about that exact issue with Basque language, and I will link it in the show notes
I
for
need to
this
listen to
episode.
that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will send it to you also because we actually had a doctor. She's a doctor now.
From
Uh,
Miami, or she's in Miami?
yeah. Yukene, Dr. I
I need
call
to
her
listen.
Dr. Yukene, but she is incredible. And she explained about these differences that we're having in the Basque Country. And it's really fascinating. But I'll give a link for the listeners. I'll send you a link, Nick, so you can listen to that
Please.
episode. But I'd love to ask you, as we know in Italy, we have so many regional languages, and there are people from region to region who are uplifting and fighting for their language and visibility for their languages.
Hmm.
So tell me a bit about what you've observed with what some of these other languages are doing, and if there's any relationship or um, collaboration or any inspiration to be had with other languages in Italy, and with Sicilian, and the fight is a dramatic word, but
Yeah,
with
yeah.
with the things that Sicilians are doing for their language.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I always say that Italy is 20 years behind all of the other European nations that are dealing with the language diversity issue. So the UK, surprisingly, has done better than most. We see Manx as a really great like shining light for a language that's kind of turning. The Welsh as well. France is terrible with languages, but we still see some good things happening with Breton and some other languages there. And the Spanish too. Spanish are like that's like the gold standard. You know, we need to be like the Spanish. Italy is way behind that. What we do have though is the German example. So in Alto Adige, German is spoken. You have to be able to speak German to hold certain positions. School has to be taught in German. They have a different kind of breakdown. Some of the valleys don't have as many German speakers, and so it only needs to be taught as like a secondary subject. But they are able to do fully bilingual education there. Now, German is a European language with multiple states that also have it as an official language. So there's a lot of different backing there. They used to be a part of Austria too. And so that's complicated. So a lot of Italians don't look at that as an example, but that is an example within the Italian state that we could look at and say, they were able to do it. We need to be able to copy that.
Mhm.
There is a specific law called Law 482, which basically Italy had no official language. And so what it did, I think this law created Italian as the official language and then also recognized 12 minority languages. It's a kind of a goofy law because some of the minority languages, they just said like Albanian, when really it's Arborish, which is a different type
Mhm.
of Albanian. I'll shout out to our friend here, Martin. The Sardinians were able to enter into it. And some people in Sicily, they're like, actually, Sardinian shouldn't be any in there because that's just another Romance language. It's just a dialect. And it's like, no, all of the Romance languages need to be recognized and protected. And so what we're seeing with them is they are bringing it into the university a little bit. I think they're teaching some classes in Sardinia and they're bringing it into the schools. They are very, very nationalist. And this is something that we as academia and me personally, I try to stay out of is the nationalist question.
Yeah.
But you do see a lot of nationalist politics tied to language politics. I believe if you're a wise politician, if you just help the language, you'll be able to separate those. But if you're a nationalist, then you could use that as a lever if you want. Sicily's not going anywhere, but I think we really, really need the language to be helped out. So we look at those other things. Now, who's doing a good job of connecting these pieces? It's our friend Guglielmo at Double Got It. And so, yeah, host on the pod here. Or sorry, guest on the phone.
You mentioned so many people who I love and are just part of my heart in this episode. This is fantastic. But
You have these
yes.
great guests. I'm honored to be one of them. But he's doing a good job of bringing people together in a way that no one really was doing before. I think, you know, what they wanted to do was really, I think, create a website to record people speaking their local language. And I don't realize they knew what they were going to be doing. Maybe they did. Maybe this is always the plan. But the way it's kind of like a lightning rod for all of these different language movements, they're even bringing people from Spain over. And I see the Sardinians and even our friends at Trinacria is a youth movement that we collaborate with in Sicily. And they often will bring folks from these minority nations in Europe, have them present and kind of, you know, inspire people to think bigger about their language. And so I think we're going to get there. I'd like to send every language activist to the Basque Country mandatory. And we went there for Ellen is the European Language Equality Network. We went there for a
Yes,
meeting.
yes.
And we've sent Alejandro Termini is one of our volunteers. We sent him to IGA, Higa, which is like a youth training program in the Basque Country. And so I want all these folks to go there and see what is possible, and then they can take that home.
Hmm. Man, Nick, I gotta say, I can see how you get people fired up about Sicilian because the passion that you feel, the passion that you have and you've shown just comes across so wonderfully and is so engaging. Um, there's so many more things that I want to ask you, to be honest. But before I move on, I want to ask you, is there anything else that I did not ask you about that you want to mention?
Do you want to talk about Sicilian Week real quick?
Excellent. Um, so you are the founder of Sicilian Week, which celebrates Sicilian culture every March. Tell us a bit about your vision behind creating it and what do you hope that people, especially Sicilian Americans, will take away from it?
Yeah. So like I mentioned before, Sicily is seeing a shrinking number of speakers in Sicily. And then in the diaspora, Sicilian is fading quickly. We're losing a lot of our elders who speak the language. And so what I wanted to do also really because I saw all of the organizations that dealt with Sicilian were not collaborating well. And that includes our organization, Cademia Siciliana. There's some other groups that didn't really collaborate with us, but had big presences on Facebook. And I thought, look, maybe the dispute is about personalities. Maybe it's about the writing system. None of that stuff matters. What matters is using the language and changing people's perception of the language, because a lot of these groups are focused on poetry and folklore, which is very important. But if all you're focusing on poetry is you're telling us that it's not something that can be used for the professional world, for sciences, for government and things like that. And so we wanted to change that. The Basques, it's always the Basques. They have I believe it's a month, maybe it's a week. It's called Euskara al Dia, and that is because everyone in the Basque country is bilingual. They all speak Spanish, they all speak Basque, and so you have to give people a chance to change their habits. Naturally, if you meet someone on the street, you're going to speak to them in Spanish first because you just assume they don't speak Basque. And so this is saying, no, this week, speak to everyone in Basque. If they don't understand you, you didn't do anything offensive, just switch to Spanish. And so we wanted to encourage that in Sicily. But it's also, so what happens is there are events in person, mostly organized by our group, Chinacria. Cademia has done a couple of events in the past too. Alejandro Termini basically ran the show. He's the VP of the organization right now, and he actually went to Sicily this year. He lives in Spain. He's Venezuelan Sicilian, lives in Spain currently, was down there organizing. They hosted a march in Corleone. They hosted events in Palermo. Last year, we hosted a couple of events inside the actual Sicilian parliament. And so, doing things in Sicilian, it was great. They put up these giant posters that said, what's the word, vastasso? It's like rude, or it's like crass to speak Italian, because that's like a phrase people say about Sicilian. And so they'll
Oh,
say and put these
okay.
signs up like, yeah, you're low class if you speak Italian, or like, stuff like that. It was like funny and ironic, and it got people thinking. It was all written in Sicilian too.
Mhm.
Um, and so it also really encourages people to do things online. So if you can't be in Sicily, it's post things online. If you've written poetry, if you've done art, if you anything related to Sicilian, share it and use the hashtag Semana do Siciliano. And we've gotten it's the third year now. It just happened. It's March 31st through April 7th. And it's incredible the amount of people who maybe haven't thought about Sicilian, or even if they're doing stuff in Sicilian. A lot of people do like funny videos. This is the time for them to think about, okay, we're encouraging people to use Sicilian. We're encouraging people to speak Sicilian in new contexts and with new people. And so whether that means it was around Easter this year, whether that means like talking with your grandma and trying to learn old words, or if that means talking with your colleagues at work in Sicilian. And for the diaspora, I think what it's helpful in doing is uniting the concept of the language as part of the identity.
Mm.
The Basques are awesome about this. And this is why I look at them as models, because the word for a Basque person is a person who has the Basque language.
Mm.
So the language and the identity are inseparable for them. What we could do with Sicilian, though, is bring that language now as part of our identity. And remember, because it is, when we think about what our grandparents said, when we think about the phrases that we heard, or the words that we have, that really is a part of our identity, but we don't think about it, and we didn't post about it a lot. People talk about the food, they talk about the music sometimes. And so putting that language in the forefront and giving people the words to talk about it has been really useful and interesting. And we saw Rosalia, the musician. She did a song where
Yeah.
she used the Sicilian language, and there was no debate on whether it was a dialect or a language. She just did it, and
Mhm.
people talked about it, and it was in the news. And so I think things like this are slowly chipping away at using the term dialect, which
Mhm.
I'm not offended by. My cousins in Sicily, that's what they said. Oh, tu parli un dialetto, dialetto. That's fine. You can call it that. It's not offensive, but as long as we're giving it the proper respect and treating it like a language, and that's
Mhm.
what that argument matters.
Right. In response to what you said about Sicilian Week, what kind of growth have you seen over the last few years of this occurrence?
Yeah, so started it. In fact, I wasn't even a member of Cademia Siciliana at the time. I reached out to Cademia and was like, "Hey, I'm trying to do this thing. Like, would you guys be interested?" And they were like no response. And it was like, "Yeah, maybe." It's like, so what I did was I reached out to like every single person. I had like a spreadsheet. That's how I think first reached out to Ilaria. And for anyone who doesn't know, it's Ilaria Casiba. She's got awesome podcasts, Come Venice Kunta, and she has an Instagram account where she teaches Sicilian. And so I said her name, but I didn't like say what she did. So
She's the best, and I gush over her all the time. She's just the absolute best. Please
She's great.
continue.
And so, but I reached out to her and like anyone and everyone. And so people were confused. So I made like graphics and like sharing on Reddit and Facebook and Instagram. People were like, so where is this? I was like, no, it's like a viral thing, it's like a hashtag thing. And so we did pretty good. We got a lot of press actually that first year. And in a way too, like when I went back to my family's hometown that summer, people were like, I saw you on the local TV. I was like, what? Like so, we made a splash. Last year, a little bit better. We did, like I said, a conference in the Sicilian Parliament, a lot of posts. And last year, we started getting some of these kind of like mid-level Sicilian influencers who do a lot of content in Sicilian, which is like, hey, I learned Sicilian from watching you. Like, please post about this.
Mm.
And they did, which is great. This year was super cool because a lot of the stuff I dreamed about in the beginning, the folks at Trinacria actually did. And so what is the stuff that's really important to me is I want to see people learning to write the language or see children involved in it. And so they actually had, I think, two different neighborhoods in Palermo. They had classes where the kids were like, it's like really simple stuff writing, but it'd be like, what is this? And it'd be like a flower and a dog and whatever. And the kids were writing in Sicilian, which is incredible to grow up from a place where even if you casually, like on the weekend, took some Sicilian writing classes, it is so much more normal for you to learn or to accept that it might be in your high school or college down the line. We did stuff with the church for the first time. I was like, look, it's currently impossible to do mass in Sicilian. Sardinians can do it in Sardinian now, but the church hasn't accepted it. The Catholic Church hasn't accepted it in Sicilian yet. So I reached out to that priest, the guy who wrote the Sicilian book. So I was like, look, what can we do? Like, if you can't do the mass in Sicilian, can we do the homily, which is like when the priest speaks in the middle? And he was like, we could do that and do the music. And so we didn't end up getting to do a mass this year, but we had, I think they did a rosary in Sicilian and we did an event with that priest and they like sang parts of his book. So like three different churches participated, which is great because it's like, okay, we're expanding. It's not just like kids doing stuff. It's like the church, you get children. We did a university class on teaching the language. Oh, and the biggest thing, this is what I've always wanted, is it was like crazy. There's like 100 stores in two different neighborhoods in Palermo. They printed out signs that said like, here we speak Sicilian, which is like what I was saying, like they do in Louisiana sub too, where it's like, this is to encourage people to use the language. But for every single business, they put a different Sicilian saying related to the business. So like I think for like a glasses store, it was like unai occhi per piangere, like I don't have eyes to cry. Like it means I'm broke. But it's like they were using these phrases that had stuff related to business. So that means they spoke to like 100 different businesses to tell them this is Sicilian Week. This is like real activism. They're on the street talking to these people. They created a unique thing for them using the language and they put up a thing that's probably still in those stores. So now all these people in these neighborhoods who speak Sicilian natively, who probably see stigma on using the language, are now seeing it written and popularized, publicized basically at local businesses they go to. So for me, that was like one of those things I was like, that would be cool if we could do. And 3 years later, these people are able to do it. And so all I could do is send them a little bit of cash to help. And, it's like, I wish I could be there helping them in person, but it's really, you mentioned this earlier about like famous people getting stuff. The diaspora, I think especially American diaspora, gets treated differently from native Sicilians. If a Sicilian American speaks Sicilian, it's like awesome, like let's write about it. If someone is going to do something different or teach a class in Sicilian, like no one's got any respect for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's changing a little bit. People are like kind of thinking like, actually, we should do that. And so I could land in the beginning like, hey, this is cool. I'm outside. Americans are cool. Then this is cool, right? But what's really important is now it's native Sicilians. It's the folks who are there, who are in the island, who are doing it, and not just the outsiders kind of like pushing it on them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I think we're starting to have a really sustainable movement.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exciting. That's really exciting. I'm excited for the future of Sicilian Week. I'm excited for people in Sicily to be excited for the future of Sicilian Week. That's really so cool.
And actually, it's funny how it's like becoming like more and more real. We do a calendar every year. And
Oh,
so
cool.
we had it like on Settimana do Siciliano. We like put it on the calendar.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. For people who want to find out about Sicilian Week next year, where can we find this information?
We've got Instagram and Facebook, and then we have a website. So the website is Semana, I say Semana do Siciliano, but it's Semana do is how it's written. And so I can give you a link, but semanadosiciliano.com, and then at sign Semana do Siciliano, and then same with Facebook. And
Okay.
so we post, we try to share other people's stuff too. For us to Cademia, they've got the orthography, they're promoting the orthography. Simona de Siciliano is a little bit more loosey goosey, and it's, if someone's writing it, that's all we care about. If they're speaking it, they're using it. So we share kind of anyone and everyone's stuff to show that there is a community of a lot of different content creators, and it grows every year. It's incredible.
That's really,
So
it is incredible. And we talked so much about Cademia Siciliana. Please let us know where we can follow Cademia and what's going on. What's current? What's happening right now?
that is a really good question. And so Cademia, we've got an Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, all Cademia Siciliana. And so what we're working on, also we have our website too, cademiasiciliana.org. Two big things we're working on. So the first one is our manifesto. So we wrote a manifesto that's basically like, look, Sicilian is at risk. This is why it's important to us. And here's the steps that need to be taken. And it's funny, like I wrote this thing, I was like being so radical, and I was like, oh man, I can't believe we shared that. But why are they just like teaching Sicilian, even just like 1 hour, that's good. But I wrote in the manifesto, if all we do is teach it for an hour a day or whatever, what we're doing is contributing to the death of this language. What we need is fully bilingual education in Sicilian and Italian, which is like, okay, normal. You're in the space, you talk to like all these different language groups. That's how you save a language. But in Italy, that's like, oh my God, this guy's high. Are you kidding me? It's but so it's a really important thing that we've done. Also, it's calling for the official recognition of Sicilian by the state, or sorry, by the region of Sicily. Even in like a symbolic way, just say like, this is, we recognize that this is a language and it's our language. We just want to start with something like that and then get it put into that law, that 482 law, to make it an official language. We have 25 towns that have signed on to it. Trapani is the largest town that signed it. And every time a town, that means the town council signed it and sent it to the Sicilian parliament saying that we agree with these thoughts. And so we're going to keep doing that. We're doing that with our partners at Trinacria. What we also are doing is we've written a law that will go beyond, and it's actually for the parliament to recognize Sicilian as a language. Doesn't call for any money or any spending, but it's that first step. And so we had a lawmaker who proposed a law that was unconstitutional. It was basically everything we wanted, but it was like, buddy, like we can't actually do that. It was like, yeah, full education, full radio, everything. Wow. And it was like, we can't do that yet, but thanks for trying. But we have the simpler one that we're trying to do with him. And then we have our dictionary we're trying to launch hopefully this year. And that's a really big one because this is an awesome dictionary, but it costs like over $1,000 to have a whole set. So there's like 5 volumes, so they're incredibly expensive and they're not reprinted. And so we're trying to create a digital solution for folks and ideally create some more resources for people. We have the kind of nucleus of an online program that will allow you to basically take the course and get maybe like an A1 to B1. And that's our goal, to make it kind of formal like that.
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting. That's so exciting. Fired up about Sicilian. Yeah. This is great. I will add the links. Well, we got a lot of links to add.
If people want to get involved, we're looking for folks who want to start chapters of Cademia Siciliana, whether it's Sicily or America. And the Semana do Siciliano, you can go on there and actually select how you can commit to this. I'll commit to speak it next year, or I'll commit to like write something or publish something. And so there's ways to get involved. And yeah, we hope that Sicilian Americans come and find us and connect with their roots.
I hope so too. And for those Sicilian Americans who are listening, there are links in the show notes for this episode so that you can link and connect with Cademia, with Nick, with Sicilian Week right away.
And if you're not in America, but if you're in Canada, Venezuela, Belgium, Australia, we want you anyways. It's not just for Americans.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah. So
Fantastic.
the diaspora, yeah, I should get used to saying that. It's funny. We would say Sicilian American. Sometimes I guess the broader term of the Americans can often work better.
Yeah, the Americas.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I love that. I love that we have this sense of consciousness now about, from Canada to Argentina, Chile. Like we're all the Americas, and it's really beautiful to see that we're thinking about that in that way now. Nick, this has been a pleasure chatting with you.
Same.
And I've learned so much. Like I said, I have so much more that I could ask you. And I know that I won't. We'll say you'll have to come back. You'll have to come back.
I'll come back when the law is passed and when my kid is speaking to me fluently in Sicilian. Then
You
yeah,
you and your son. We'll do
that would
we'll
actually be
do
really
a
cool.
group episode. But this has been really such a pleasure chatting with you.
And thanks for all the work you do and uniting the international English community.
Thank you. I like to end each episode with the same question. We've been having fun this whole conversation, but just to have a bit of fun at the end. Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or words of advice in Sicilian to share and to teach us?
I do have one for you.
Okay.
This is a funny one from our town. It's Pace, Panzarella e Parisi sono al rovina do paese. And that means Pace, Panzarella, and Parisi are the ruin of the town.
Oh no, that's not a real saying. How'd you get in there?
But then I think they have like a follow up to it. It's like, well, and there's also one on every street. And so there's like, I guess those are like the most common names.
Okay.
And so, and we did get booted out of the town. So I guess we were troublemakers.
Oh
So,
no.
yeah.
So perhaps I want to learn how to say this.
Okay. Okay.
And I want our listeners to follow along too. I'll repeat after you and then we'll try to put it all together.
Yeah.
All right.
Pace,
Pace,
Panzariella
Panzarieda
e Parisi
e Parisi
sono a
Sunua
rovina
Ruvina
do paese.
do Paesi.
Pace, Panzariella e Parisi
Pace, Panzareda e Parisi
sono a rovina
Sunua Ruvina
do paese.
do Paesi.
When we first went over there, my cousins, they wrote this down on a piece of paper and were like, look at this. And I was like, oh gosh.
So this is a real saying that
It's a real sad. It's not said anywhere else, but in our town they say that. I can give you another one that's maybe a little more like widespread. This
okay.
one's più scuro di mezzanotte non si può fare. And più scuro means like darker. So più scuro di mezzanotte, darker than midnight, non si può fare. It can't get. So it doesn't get darker than midnight. And that means like when things are, rough, it's like, well, they can't get worse. So they'll get better.
Mm-hmm. Don't tempt fate, but
Yeah.
yeah. Can I try that one too?
Yeah.
All right.
So, and we'll do it in, our pronunciation is più scuro,
One more time.
più scuro
Più scuro
di mezzanotte
di mezzanotte
non si può
non si può
fare.
fare.
Più scuro di mezzanotte non si può fare.
Più scuro di mezzanotte
Non si può fare.
non si può fare.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
When am I gonna go back to Sicily?
I say, we're asking the same question. The same question.
I know you don't have an answer to that. I'm just sad. Thank you so much again for this conversation.
Thanks to you, Ella.
Nick. This has really been a lot of fun. Before I let you go, you should have a fun answer for this one, but before I let you go, if you're in Sicily anywhere in Sicily. And you've been talking to someone for quite some time, but now it's time for you to go your separate ways.
Mhm.
What is the best way to say goodbye?
Well, this is a fun way, or it may not be true, but this is the way to say it. Ni vediamo. We'll see each other. Ni I'll say it the way I say it and the way you can also say it. Ni vediamo is how I would say it. Ni vediamo. And then also you can just say ni vidamo. Ni
Ni
vidamo.
vediamo or ni vedemo?
Yeah, and that one you can kind of see is more like Italian, like vedere, vidamo. And so ni is us, which
Hmm.
is very weird. If you know Italian, it's chi, right? So
Yeah.
it's ni and Sicilian. So ni vidamo. We'll
Ni
see.
vedemo.
We'll see each other.
Ni vedemo, Nick.
Yeah. Ni vediamo.
Thank you so much again, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Of
Bye.
course. Take care.
New episodes of Speaking Tongues are available every Monday, 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to like and share episodes with other language lovers like yourselves.